who better to talk about confidence flies with than a legend himself? I am proud to announce to all of you, we have a special guest on today's show, Mr. Tom Baltz. Tom, welcome to the show.
Pleasure, pleasure.
No, the pleasure is all mine. So I've been trying to record Tom for years, and now you're gonna benefit from it because Tom has agreed through all of his years guiding, we're gonna get to that number soon, that he's gonna share, is it 5 flies?
We can do 5.
He's agreeing to do 5. You heard him say 5 flies. We're gonna talk about Tom Baltz's 5 confidence flies. Stay tuned. Confidence fly, what do you have for us, Mr. Tom Baltz?
My number 1 fly, probably the first bug I tie on just about anywhere I go, including Montana, State College. My wife even hooks steelhead on them, is my paranymph. Many of you might have seen me tie those at the fly fishing shows. I think there was about a 10-year stretch I didn't tie any other fly because every time I tried, somebody, well, I want to see that parachute you do. So anyway, it's very generic. I use a calf body hair post. It's a real tactical fly because I tie that post in 3 main colors, but I'll add a 4th occasionally. Number 1 color is orange. There's not too much orange stuff floating along the stream, and you can see it. Also, certain lighting conditions will call for a yellow wing in low light conditions, or a black wing in flat water with a lot of glare on it. And okay, I'll tie a few in pink.
Yeah.
That real bright pink is very, very visible.
Okay.
The orange is my favorite. I use that 85 or 90% of the time. With that fly, I'm just trying to, it's got a hare's mask body on it, grizzly hackle. The hackle's tied with the shiny side down and the dull side up, so it's like an upside down umbrella. Suspends that little body down in the surface film or into the water even. It's kind of like a floating nymph platform. Little trailing shuck on it. It's a powerful attractor. Sizes just match that to the bugs that you're seeing on the water.
Okay.
If you have sulfurs, I mean, you have 2 basic sizes of sulfurs in Pennsylvania. The earlier ones are about a 14 size. The later ones, which blend in to the end of the early ones, is the also beginning of the little pale evening duns, which are more like a size 16. That size can vary a little bit from watershed to watershed, based like fertility, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. So you might need an 18 here and there. Out west, we kill them on an 18 on the Missouri. That we get there when the little PMDs are on, which are the same kind of a bug as our sulfurs. So I just try and match the size to the bugs I see. Now, if you're into green drakes, this is not going to, that's an exception. Too bad for you if you get into the green drakes. You're not going to catch anything anyway. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, some people do well with that.
He's kidding with you.
It's a pretty brief time frame, and my experience with green drakes is you almost have to be lucky to get there when they're doing it. These other flies are going to work most of the time for most of the people. You're at least going to be in the ball game. Anything from Hendrickson's, Calabatus on lakes, all the sulfurs, it's killer on sulfurs. It suggests, not imitates, the nymph drifting along at the surface. So that a fish, even a big fish that's rising, has confidence that fly's going to be there when he gets there, instead of flying away at the very last minute.
So we're calling this a paranymph. This is, you call this the paranymph. Is it fair to classify this as an emerger?
I hate that term because it doesn't tell you that much, but yeah, that's what it is, because it has the shuck. The bug's trapped inside the, is trapped. It could be a cripple, it could be a lot of things. I make the whole body just out of hare's mask. People have said, well, you could put some yellow on the front, and, for sulfur and some olive on the front.
Adult coming up,
but then I'm starting to get back into that old hatch matcher thing where I have a whole bunch of different flies, and a lot of them I hardly ever use. I've tried lots of different things. I've tried mixing sparkle stuff in, made some with olive dyed hare's mask. None of them worked any better, and most of them not as well as the original one. I take a hare's mask and clip everything that I can get off the ears and between the ears and right down the center of the face, not the cheeks on the very edges. Blend it up, and that's what I use for the dubbing on that fly. So
Well, don't tell them too much, because as a special treat to all of you there, Tom has agreed to tie the paranymph on my channel. So if you look down below in the description of this video, you will find a link to the video once we release it of Tom tying his paranymph. So we'll give you all that fly tying stuff then. Let me pick your brain about one more thing with this fly. Any special tips for fishing it? Do you like to fish it dead drift? Lots of S-curves in the tippet? Anything you got for us there?
Well, this is definitely a dead drift kind of a fly. I like a George Harvey style leader. Most guys, I almost never fish below 5X anymore. Even when I get down to size 20s and even 22s, if I can get away with it. I just haven't found the real need to. It's more about maybe how I actually tie my fly on, especially with the little teeny flies. So I just tie it on with a regular clinch knot. I want to make sure that I can get some S-curve, some slack in that leader, because this is definitely, as I say, this is a dead drift fly. I've caught fish with it sunk. I've caught fish with it when it was scooting around a little bit, but there's other flies that we fish that we scoot around. I intend for it to primarily be a mayfly nymph suggestion, but I've also had good luck with it when certain midges were coming off. My number 2 is going to be a caddis imitation. For a long time, the x-caddis is a great pattern, great design. To me, it's a takeoff on a Pennsylvania fly. That Sid Neff from Pittsburgh was the first guy to put a body and deer hair on a hook and just suggest a caddis fly. Craig Matthews out in West Yellowstone added that Zelon tail, like a hatching fly, or an emerger, or whatever you want to call it, a trapped bug. And it's a great pattern, but I know with guiding, the problem I had with it was it's a low rider and people could never see where their fly was. So I started adding various hot spots, and I put an orange CDC tuft on there. That was fine, except for then they got it, and I put a CDC underwing under the deer hair. A great fly, real nice and bouncy. It's not a beginner's fly because people get it wet and they can't get it dry again. And also fishing out west on the Madison particularly, if you catch a fish on that fly, which it was deadly, but by the time you got it ready to fish again, you were 200 or 300 yards downstream. The Madison is not slow for anybody. It's just, the 50-mile long riffle, they call it. So I wanted something that I could get back in action a lot faster. If I catch a fish, I can literally squeeze this fly between my shirt sleeve or whatever, and I mean back in action right away. I call it the iron x-caddis because I put a synthetic underwing under there. My version, I don't have a lot of deer hair on top, just enough to kind of give it some of that effect. And that underwing really was what floated the fly. The commercial version is probably the opposite. Some of the guys who are buying them, the shops don't exactly get it. So, they can fish it how they like, I'll fish it how I like. But that fly bounces around pretty well. And I put a pink sighter on it. Again, I think pink might be the single most visible color. I had some issues with one of the guys out west, shop owner. He said, that fly's really killer, but sometimes I cut that pink thing off because he said, I think those trout really don't like that sometimes. And I didn't say anything, but I don't think I ever saw a rainbow trout, wild or stock, that didn't like pink stuff.
No, I don't know. And by the way, for anyone who watches my channel, you probably all know, like, my favorite dry fly of all time is the x-caddis, and the #1 color I use for all my parachute posts is pink. So this is a fly that's like speaking to my heart right now.
Yeah, it's a killer fly, and you can skate it a little bit too. And it's also a convertible fly. Like when we're out west on the Missouri, we're pretty much daytime fishing. We're beat by the time the evening fishing starts. You've been out in a drift boat all day, and the sun in Montana is hot, and you're beat. And you go have a martini or two. You're not going fishing again around dark. So I don't need the tail on it, the hatching version so much. There's tons and tons of caddis. They're kind of like dead or dying, and they're on the water. I just cut the tail off. And mash it around a little bit, and the more it gets chewed up, the better it works. I have the ones I used last year. They're the first ones I'm going to tie on when we go out next week. So I know the new ones.
Well, I know people are going to ask, body color, sizes you prefer to have in your box.
For that one, I tie 14, 16s 90% of the time. I might have a few 18s somewhere. I fish the 16 the very most because it's a tan kind of a fly. Those tan caddis seem to be more in that size range. Again, hare's mask, one of my favorite materials. if I had to pick 5 materials, hare's mask would maybe be the first one I would choose.
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, your first 2 flies came from it.
Again, I dub it on there kind of loosely, but it's still tight. It's going to take a lot of chewing. And it's got all those little hairs sticking out, so I don't have to wind hackle up through it, and it suggests all those legs and everything. Yeah, I don't know, the fish seem to like it. It's a killer bug.
I like this, the iron x-caddis.
So I call it iron X because I can beat it up pretty badly and it still works with just literally squeeze it in my shirt or a piece of paper towel or something like that.
You just heard that I know Tom mainly from the fly fishing show, the International Fly Tying Symposium. And whenever I see him tying, you've always got hundreds of flies in front of you that you're selling. I know many of my audience, they tie their own flies, but for someone who's watching who's saying, these 5 flies sound awesome, I don't have them at my local shop, do you still take custom orders?
Yeah, of course I sell the flies at the show, but if you can't make the show or whatever, and I don't put out a price list or anything like that, but yeah, I take orders for the flies, mostly that I would have in stock. This paranymph, the caddis I just talked about, and a few others, well, quite a few others actually.
Best way for them to contact you?
Be my email.
Okay.
Best way.
Okay, so we'll put your email down below in the description of this video. So if you do want to reach out to Tom for some flies, you can definitely do so.
Yeah, flies, any questions about them, so forth and so on.
Okay. All right, what else do you have for us, Mr. Tom Baltz?
Well, especially anywhere from late spring and right into the fall, terrestrial imitations or suggestions are key flies in any trout fisherman's fly box.
Yeah.
You know, they can run the gamut, but beetles I don't fish so much because they're hard to see. Even if you put a sighter on them, they land upside down half the time anyhow.
Yep.
And I don't like the foam beetles because the fish will swallow them, especially the softer foam ones.
Okay.
The hard ones, maybe not so much. The soft ones, they'll eat them. And if you're a little slow on the hook set, then you're going to have one hooked down in the throat. And even with a barbless hook, it's not a good thing. Grasshoppers, to me, are not a big factor in most of our eastern fishing. Yeah. You go out west and you got like prairie to the horizon. There's like 10 heptillion billion grasshoppers out there. And if it's a calm day, the wind's blowing 20. So it blows a lot of hoppers in the stream. They like it. Yeah. But we just don't see that here, which is not to say you can't catch one on a hopper.
Sure.
Good bug if you just want to throw something on you can't sink to throw a dropper underneath. But to catch fish, I'm going to stick with the ants. There's ants everywhere, and there's lots of them. When you boil it all down, an ant looks like an ant. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. You can tie them in different colors. So ants, I tie my ants with fur, 2 humps, post in the middle, parachute ant, post in the middle, not coming out of the front hump. I use grizzly hackle on them, even if and almost all the ones I tie are black, because mainly I don't have time to tie other colors. But brown, on the yellow breech is a traditional old fly that few people know about. It's basically fluorescent orange. Yes. And kind of smallish, actually, little ones. But a black ant, size 12 to 20, probably 14, 16. I'll start with the bigger one, and if that doesn't work, I might drop down. Yes. Parachute, post just like I did on the paranymph, that orange calf body hair. I'll tie some with yellow as well, because if you go up in the mountains, and if anybody that's familiar with Harry Murray and his fly shop in Virginia, you're going to see Mr. Rapidan ant. Well, yeah. Harry asked me to come up with an ant, and I sent him that. I tried to describe it on the phone. He wasn't so sure. Send me some. I sent him 2. Like 2 days later, the phone rang, and he ordered like a pile of them. So anyway.
Well, let's talk about ants, because, you know, I've always said, like, you show me a trout, I'll show you something that's going to eat an ant, because that's like one of my go-to. Doesn't matter if I see a fish in May and they ignore a few dry flies, I'm throwing an ant even then. Yeah. It doesn't have to be summertime. I heard some little things though I want to kind of probe you about. Number one, you like grizzly hackle. I love grizzly hackle. I feel like that shows movement just in itself, having that black-white. The parachute post though, that's really something for the sea. You're using that as a sighter?
Yep, strictly.
Is there a reason you're not going Antron or EP fiber or something like that?
Well, I like to tie with the hair. Partly I like to tie with it. Secondly, I think it's actually more visible. Okay. Now I might be splitting hairs, but sometimes that's what the deal is. It's the difference between catching a tough fish and not catching them, is being able to see that fly. And with the synthetics, they're translucent. A certain amount of light passes through them, doesn't come back to your eye. You only see the light that gets reflected back. that calf body hair is not translucent.
That makes sense.
Also, it's a little stiffer and easier, especially when you get to the small size. It's a little easier to wrap that parachute hackle around.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to stand up straighter and stiffer, and you can get it going. And so I think it's a little bit easier to tie. Now, there is some things to be said about the synthetics.
Yeah.
It's not that easy sometimes to get good hair. You have to, every fly shop you go in, you should have a list of materials in your head that you're always looking for. And when you find the good stuff, buy it. Yeah. You might not need it today, but next week when you want it, you can't get it.
This is why I have like 10 grizzly saddles at my house right now, because I love them.
Me too.
Let's talk about fishing this. Whenever I think about throwing an ant, it's not a fly that I have on all day. It seems like it's a fly, whenever I have a rising trout, I have my 2 or 3 flies that are in that progression, especially like in June and July, and the ant's one of those. Or is this a fly that you're fishing this thing all day long?
Well, sometimes I do fish it all day long. You know, I'm going to usually start off with a paranymph, because if we're starting in the morning, you know, there's some little bugs, little assorted blue-wing olives can run anywhere from a size 14 down to pretty small.
Yeah.
That can show up, and you might see only a couple, but the fish are here 24/7, so they know what those things are. Yeah. And again, I'm just trying to suggest this shape of these bugs and something that's familiar to the fish. I don't even have to see any around. The fish don't forget this stuff. I put my post in the middle because it makes my ant float flat instead of with the back hump underwater, basically. Like I would want an emerger maybe to float like that of a mayfly, but not an ant. I want him flush on the surface, and I put the grizzly hackle on because it's fairly translucent, and it lets that body shape show through. So I can take that ant to downtown somewhere. I was going to name a city, but I won't do that.
Don't name it. We're not burning any cities or spots.
No. I can take that thing downtown and hold it by the post upside down and ask anybody I run into, what do you think this imitates? And I guarantee you, almost, not all of them, but almost all of them say, well, that's an ant.
Before we get any further into this video, let's take a quick time out, because I kind of introduced Tom Baltz. I mean, I've told you, he's like a mentor that I look up to. He's someone I consider an ambassador for fly fishing. He's been guiding for 50 years. I mean, to know that he's done that in this area of the state, this area of the country, is just, that's incredible on its own. So I hope some of you reach out and book him, buy his flies, do all that fun stuff. But there's something else I want to pick your brain about. Last year, I opened Facebook one day and I saw this wonderful picture of Tom Baltz. He received the Orvis Lifetime Achievement Award. And, you know, he jokes and says that, hey, they ran out of people to give it to. That's not true at all. First of all, congratulations for that award.
Thank you.
It was awesome seeing you, very deserving. Can you tell us anything about that, or just the experience in general?
Well, it was certainly very humbling. I look around and I think, oh, there's different other people that are more deserving of it than I am. But, you know, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. Before I was guiding even, I was still in the sporting goods, mostly fishing end of it. And I kind of just went from Montgomery Wards to fine-tune it down to where I am now, which is a one-man band. So I fine-tuned it the opposite direction most people would go. But, you know, I went from Montgomery Ward Sporting Goods to the largest sporting goods store in the world at that time. Was the second biggest store in the world. It was part of the old Herman's chain out of Carteret, New Jersey. We had a fabulous sporting goods store, 70,000 square feet of selling space. You could buy bamboo rods and dry flies. You could buy the finest firearms in the world. You could outfit yourself to climb Mount Everest in that store. So it was quite the place. I met a lot of people in there. You know, Lefty Cray, Paul Jorgensen, all those guys, the Maryland crowd. A few other odd people too, including some people who were partners at the time with Ed Koch up here in Pennsylvania. Then I got home from work one day, and those people that were partners with Ed Koch called me up, said, you know, Ed's not at the shop anymore. Are you interested in coming up here and working? And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And about 2 days I was up here, period.
What shop was this?
This was, at that time, known as the Yellow Breeches Fly Shop.
Okay. Wow. And some history there.
In fact, the old sign is still in the current TCO shop here in Boiling Springs, cool. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love that sign. But yeah, so I worked in there for over 17 years, and it changed hands a couple times. And So I just said, like, I'm gonna just start. I know enough people. I think I can squeeze out a living. At the time, it was just me and Bob Klauser guiding. He did all the bass, and I had all the trout.
Wow.
Now, there wasn't the demand for it that there is today.
Sure.
That's grown quite a bit here in the East. But yeah, I'm still doing that, you know, tying. I don't know how many years. I've probably been doing the fly fishing shows pushing 30 years, and that's just a guesstimate. I can't remember how many I've done.
And I know you've written articles for publications, maybe done TV, videos, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, you still provide updates to the Orvis website for streams, right?
Right. I do the report for the yellow breeches on the Orvis website, which has 250 or 260 different reports from around the country, in fact, even around the world. I've done some writing, been published in, first thing I ever had published was a little long defunct little thing. It was not really even a magazine. It was like kind of a newsletter. It was called The Fly Rodder. Okay. Yeah, I wrote a number of articles over the years for the Mid-Atlantic Fly Fishing Guide. So I've done a bunch of things like that. I've had some flies that, you know, hopefully are gonna have become standards, at least in certain circles. You know, I can see Midge has been a bestseller in the Orvis catalog for a long time. I had other flies in there as well. And now I have various flies being produced by Montana Fly Company, including the paranymph and the I Can See It Midge and that iron x-caddis and a number of bugs. So yeah, it's been very
As
gratifying.
you're hearing, he is definitely deserving of the Lifetime Achievement Award. I mean, you've been doing this stuff for decades, so, you know, very deserving of that award. Congrats for earning that. And
Thank you.
I always tell Tom, like, listen, I've written 2 books. I know like this much compared to him. You now have his email. He gave it to me. It's in this video's description. Email him, tell him you want a Tom Baltz book. We know it's in there. We got to get it out.